Three symbols appear in varying forms in the visual identity systems of every technology company that reaches institutional scale: a circle, a grid, an eye or lens, not as aesthetic choices, as structural inevitabilities. In 2019, designer and semiotician Liz Stinson published an analysis in Wired documenting what she called symbol convergence in Silicon Valley visual identity, the observable phenomenon of technology companies, independently and across different design eras, arriving at the same three geometric primitives in their logos, interfaces, and architectural choices. Stinson framed it as a design culture observation. The more precise framing is an institutional one. These three symbols have appeared in every major Western power system for 2,000 years because they do not represent authority, they produce it. The convergence is not coincidence. It is the institutional inheritance of a symbolic grammar that predates corporate identity design by millennia. By the end of this video, you will know exactly which three symbols these are, what documented neurological and institutional function each one performs, and why a technology company that reaches sufficient institutional scale will adopt all three not through deliberate historical research, but because the symbols are embedded in the design education system that trained every visual identity professional currently working in the industry. The grammar was already in the curriculum. The companies did not choose it, they inherited it. Look at the logos of the 10 most valuable technology companies in the world. Apple, a circle with a byte removed, a modified sphere, the oldest geometric symbol of completeness and cosmic authority in Western iconographic tradition. Google, a wordmark built on circular letter forms, the search interface a white circle, the company's product ecosystem represented by a grid of colored circles. Microsoft, a four-square grid, the window as institutional frame, the operating system's visual language built entirely on rectangular division of space. Meta, an infinite loop, a continuous circular form with no entry and no exit point. Amazon, a circle completed by an arrow. Intel, a circle. NVIDIA, a stylized eye inside a geometric frame. Oracle, a wordmark derived from circular letter forms. Samsung, an oval containing text. IBM, horizontal grid of parallel lines. The circle appears in every case. The grid appears in most. The eye or lens, the aperture, the camera, the sensor appears with increasing frequency as the companies mature. This is not a design trend. Design trends are temporary. This pattern has been stable across every iteration of technology company visual identity for 40 years. Something more durable than aesthetic preference is producing it. But that is only the surface. The three symbols circle, grid, eye are not arbitrary geometric forms. Each one has a documented functional history as an authority transmission technology in Western institutional design. And the documentation is precise enough to explain not just why the symbols appear but what specific neurological response each one is engineered to produce. Begin with the circle. The circle's documented history as an institutional authority symbol begins in ancient Mesopotamia, where the cylinder seal, a circular object rolled across clay to leave an impression, was the primary authentication technology of the Sumerian administrative state. The circular impression was not decorative. It was the legal signature of institutional authority, and its form a continuous line with no beginning and no end communicated what Sumerian administrative law required, that the authority it represented was unbroken, complete, and without the vulnerability of an entry point that could be challenged. The Roman Imperial seal was circular. The papal bull, the formal document through which the Catholic Church exercised its highest institutional authority, took its name from the bulla, the circular lead seal attached to the document. The circular halo in Christian iconography was adopted directly from the Roman imperial tradition of representing divine authority through a circular light emanating from the head of the emperor. The British royal seal is circular. The seal of every American state is circular. The seal of the United States federal government is circular. The documented neurological function of the circle as an authority symbol has been studied in visual processing research since the 1970s. Circles are processed by the human visual system as non-threatening, complete, Enclosed, they have no sharp angles that trigger the threat detection response associated with pointed forms. They communicate containment without aggression. They produce a specific cognitive response. The subject perceives the institution as self-sufficient, complete, and beyond the need for external validation. The authority is not argued. It is geometrically stated. Now the grid. The grid's institutional history as an authority transmission technology begins with the Roman urban planning system, the castrum, the standardized rectangular city layout that the Roman military deployed across every territory it administered. The grid was not an aesthetic preference. It was an administrative technology. A gridded city was a legible city, one whose spatial organization communicated Roman institutional order to every person who moved through it, regardless of whether they could read Latin. The grid said, this space is administered. This space is measured. This space is controlled. The grid entered Western institutional architecture through the monasteries of the medieval period, the cloister as a gridded spatial system for organizing time, movement, and attention, and entered Western visual design through the manuscript tradition, where the grid as page layout was developed by Benedictine scriptoria as a technology for communicating textual authority. The Gutenberg Bible's page layout was a grid. The institutional authority of the printed text derived in part from the grid that organized it. In the 20th century, the grid entered corporate design through Swiss graphic design, specifically through the international typographic style developed at the Basel School of Design in the 1950s, whose explicit philosophical objective was to use the grid as a visual communication of institutional rationality, objectivity, and control. Josef M. Müller-Brockmann's 1981 text grid systems in graphic design is the canonical reference for this tradition. It is still in the curriculum of every major design school in the Western world. This is the transmission most technology historians have not documented as a single lineage, from the Roman castrum through the Benedictine cloister, through the Gutenberg page, through the Basel grid, to the operating system interface, the Microsoft Windows grid, the iOS home screen grid, the Google search results grid. These are not UI conventions adopted for functional reasons. They are the latest iteration of a 2,000-year institutional authority communication tradition that equates spatial control with legitimate power. Now the I. The I as institutional authority symbol has a documented history that requires careful disambiguation. The I in isolation without its institutional framing is a biological form. The I within a geometric frame, the aperture, the lens, the circle, the triangle, is a documented institutional authority symbol that appears in the administrative and religious iconography of ancient Egypt, Mesopotamia, Rome, and the entire Western Christian tradition through the Eye of Providence that appears on the reverse of the United States dollar bill and in the iconographic programs of hundreds of European cathedrals. The documented functional logic of the eye symbol in institutional authority contexts is consistent across all of these appearances. The eye communicates observation without the possibility of concealment. The institution that carries the eye symbol is communicating that it sees everything within its domain, that the subject's behavior is always potentially observed, and that the institution's authority extends into the private behavioral space of those it governs. The panopticon's authority derived from the eye. So did the divine authority of the God described in the Hebrew Bible as omniscient. The eye symbol communicates the same institutional claim across both contexts. This authority cannot be escaped by being invisible. The camera lens as the contemporary institutional eye is not a metaphorical reframing. It is a direct functional continuation. NVIDIA's stylized eye logo, the camera module as the most culturally significant physical element of the contemporary smartphone, the camera icon as the symbol for observation and documentation in every interface system. These are the institutional eye, adopted by technology companies at the moment they achieve sufficient scale to require the authority claim the symbol communicates. If you have identified additional instances of the circle, grid, or eye in institutional contexts outside technology, financial, governmental, educational, or medical, describe the specific context in the comments. We are building a comprehensive map of the symbolic grammar's contemporary distribution. Here is where the symbol analysis becomes a precision instrument for reading institutional intention. The three symbols do not appear randomly. They appear in a documented sequence that corresponds to the stages of an institution's authority development, and the sequence is consistent enough across technology companies to constitute a pattern with predictive value. Wait, look at the structure again. The circle appears first. It appears in the founding visual identity because the founding institution needs to communicate completeness and self-sufficiency before it has the scale to demonstrate them through performance. The circle is a claim made in advance of the evidence. Apple's circular apple modified by the byte. The difference mark appeared in 1977, when Apple had 570 employees. The claim of institutional completeness was geometric, not operational. The geometry preceded the reality by approximately 15 years. That is not a design choice. It is an authority advance, the symbolic claim deployed before the institutional performance that would eventually justify it, in the documented tradition of every founding institutional seal in Western history. The grid appears second at the moment the institution achieves sufficient scale to require the communication of systemic order. The grid says, we are not one thing. We are a system. We are organized. We administer a domain. Microsoft's gridded Windows interface appeared in 1985, when the company had achieved sufficient market penetration to require the communication of administrative authority rather than just product appeal. The grid was the authority claim of a company that had stopped being a product and become an infrastructure. The eye appears third at the moment the institution achieves the scale at which observation becomes its primary value proposition. Google's evolution from a search interface into a surveillance infrastructure was accompanied by the progressive appearance of eye and lens iconography across its product ecosystem. Google Maps, Google Photos, Google Lens, the camera-forward design of Google hardware. The eye appears when the institution is ready to make the claim that its authority derives from its comprehensive observation capacity. The pattern does not stop there. The three symbols, when all three are present simultaneously in a single institutional identity system, constitute what the heraldic tradition called full arms, the complete symbolic declaration of institutional sovereignty. A company that has the circle, the grid, and the eye in its visual identity system is communicating, in the documented grammar of 2,000 years of Western institutional symbolism, that it claims authority over completeness, administration, and observation simultaneously. That is the authority claim of a sovereign institution, a commercial one. Several technology companies now carry all three symbols in their visual identity systems. The companies that carry all three are the ones currently arguing, in regulatory hearings across the United States and Europe, that they should not be subject to the oversight frameworks that apply to sovereign institutions. If this investigation is worth continuing, signal it. The algorithm reads that as a vote for independent analysis. Here is the applicable lens. Next time you encounter the logo, interface, or architectural design of any major institution, not just technology companies, look for the three symbols. The circle communicates, we are complete and self-sufficient, beyond external validation. The grid communicates, we administer a domain, we impose order, our authority is systematic. The eye communicates, we observe, we know, our authority extends into the behavioral space of those within our domain. Count which symbols are present. Note which are absent. The absence is as informative as the presence. An institution that has the circle and the grid, but not the eye, is claiming completeness and administrative authority, but not yet claiming observational sovereignty. An institution that has the eye but not the grid is claiming observational authority without the communication of systematic administration, a claim that tends to appear in institutions whose power is concentrated rather than distributed. And note the sequence in which the symbols appeared in the institution's history. The sequence maps the institution's authority development with the precision that its press releases and annual reports will never provide. The symbols are the honest communication. Everything else is the story the institution tells about the symbols. The next layer of this investigation goes deeper into a fourth symbol that appears in the visual identity of institutions that have achieved what the heraldic tradition recognized as the highest level of sovereignty, claim, and which technology companies have begun adopting it in the last 5 years. Subscribe to follow the analysis. The question is not whether these three symbols appear in the visual identity systems of every technology company that reaches institutional scale. They do. The question is whether the companies that carry them understand what they are claiming, or whether the grammar is so deeply embedded in the design education system that the claim is being made without the claimant's full awareness of what they are asserting.